Sometimes a single sentence can set the entire sports world on fire. That's exactly what happened when Angel Reese compared herself to Michael Jordan. Yes, that Michael Jordan, 6 championships, 5 MVPs, the player many still consider the greatest basketball player to ever touch a ball. When Reese made the comment, it immediately exploded across social media. Fans, analysts, and even former players started debating what she meant. Was she talking about impact, confidence, or was this simply one of those bold statements meant to grab attention? But the internet didn't waste time reacting. Clips spread everywhere. Memes started appearing within hours. And suddenly, the conversation around Reese wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about whether the comparison made any sense at all. Because in professional sports, comparisons to legends always come with expectations. The moment you bring up a name like Michael Jordan, fans start looking at the numbers, the championships, the efficiency, the dominance that defined an entire era of basketball, and that's where the debate quickly became uncomfortable for some supporters. But what made the situation even more interesting was what happened next. Instead of critics on social media pushing back, the most direct response came from someone who actually helped build the WNBA into what it is today, Lisa Leslie. And here's the twist. She didn't say it during a TV debate, she didn't tweet about it, she didn't bring it up during a studio segment. She said it directly while sitting across from Angel Reese herself. On Reese's own podcast. What happened during that conversation instantly became one of the most talked about moments in women's basketball. Because when a Hall of Famer decides to give honest feedback in front of the entire world, people listen. And what Lisa Leslie said next completely changed the direction of the conversation. What happened next is what really sent the story into overdrive. Instead of critics or analysts questioning the comparison, the most direct response came from someone who actually understands what dominance in women's basketball looks like, Lisa Leslie. And this wasn't some random commentator throwing shade from a TV studio. Leslie is one of the most respected figures in the history of the WNBA. 2-time champion, 3-time MVP, 4 Olympic gold medals, a Hall of Famer who spent over a decade dominating the exact position Angel Reese plays today. So when she speaks about post-play, finishing at the rim, and what elite big players are supposed to do, people listen. But the setting made the moment even more dramatic. Leslie didn't say it during an ESPN debate or in a post-game interview. She said it while sitting across from Angel Reese herself on Reese's own podcast. Reese likely expected the kind of conversation that usually happens when legends visit athlete podcasts. Stories about the early days of the league, some encouragement, maybe a few compliments about the next generation. Instead, Leslie went straight into coaching mode. Without hesitation, she told Reese the biggest thing she needed to improve immediately was her finishing around the basket, specifically her layups, not her defense, not her rebounding, not her leadership. Her layups. It wasn't said with hostility or disrespect. In fact, Leslie framed it as something completely fixable. She pointed out that Reese has the size, the strength, and the defensive instincts to be a dominant force in the league. But finishing consistently around the rim, that was the gap. And hearing that from a Hall of Famer made the moment powerful. Because Leslie wasn't attacking Reese, she was giving the kind of honest feedback that true mentors give when they actually want to see someone improve. The kind of advice that might be uncomfortable to hear, but impossible to ignore. That's why the clip spread everywhere. Fans weren't just watching a conversation between two players. They were watching a legend openly address one of the most talked about criticisms surrounding Reese's game. And the timing couldn't have been more interesting. Because while Reese was being challenged to improve the fundamentals of her game, another young star in the league was dominating headlines for a completely different reason. By the time Lisa Leslie mentioned the layup issue, the conversation was already everywhere. Clips had been circulating online for weeks, showing missed finishes around the rim by Angel Reese. Fans were breaking down possessions, slow-motion replays were trending on social media, and analysts were starting to ask a simple question: why was a dominant rebounder struggling to finish the easiest shots in basketball? In the WNBA, especially for post players, finishing around the basket is supposed to be automatic. These are shots taken just a few feet from the rim, opportunities that most elite big players convert at extremely high rates. But Reese's numbers quickly became part of the discussion. Her overall rookie field goal percentage hovered around the high 30% range, and analysts pointed out that even shots taken very close to the basket weren't falling consistently. For a player known for her physical presence, rebounding ability, and relentless energy, the missed finishes started to stand out. And once something like that becomes noticeable, it spreads fast. Broadcasters mentioned it during games. Clips went viral on TikTok, and some commentators even reacted in real time during broadcasts when certain attempts didn't drop. At that point, the internet had already turned the issue into a running storyline. That's why Leslie's comments carried so much weight. She didn't introduce a brand new criticism, she simply confirmed something fans and analysts had already been discussing. But coming from Leslie, it meant something different. As one of the greatest post players in WNBA history, she understands exactly what dominance around the basket should look like. For over a decade, she built her career finishing plays efficiently in the paint, often against the best defenders in the world. So when she said Reese's finishing mechanics could be improved, it sounded less like criticism and more like a professional diagnosis. More importantly, Leslie didn't frame it as a permanent flaw. She described it as something that could be fixed with repetition, practice, and adjustments in touch around the rim. The message wasn't that Reese couldn't improve, it was that improvement would require serious work. And that's where the conversation became fascinating. Because while critics were focusing on Reese's struggles near the basket, Reese herself seemed to be focused on building something much bigger off the court. While critics focused on missed shots and viral clips, Angel Reese was quietly building something else, her brand. And in today's sports world, that matters almost as much as what happens on the court. Over the past few years, Reese has positioned herself as more than just a basketball player. She's built a massive social media presence, launched her own podcast, appeared at major events, and leaned heavily into the kind of personality-driven marketing that modern athletes use to expand their influence. One of the biggest moves came when she partnered with Reebok, becoming one of the key faces of the brand's pushback into basketball culture. The deal wasn't just about shoes or apparel, it was about personality, visibility, and long-term marketing potential. That's the playbook many modern athletes follow. In the age of social media, players are no longer just athletes performing on a court. They're also content creators, entrepreneurs, and public personalities. A strong personal brand can open doors to endorsement deals, media opportunities, and long-term financial success that goes far beyond a player's career. And Reese clearly understands that. Her podcast, Unapologetically Angel, gives her a platform to control her own narrative. Instead of waiting for interviews or press conferences, she brings guests directly into her world. That includes fellow athletes, celebrities, and even legends like Lisa Leslie. It's a strategy designed to build influence. But there's also a challenge that comes with building such a strong public persona. When the brand grows faster than the on-court production, the spotlight becomes much brighter. Fans begin comparing the marketing message with the actual performance, and every statistic or highlight starts getting analyzed more closely. That's the tightrope many modern athletes walk. Confidence and self-promotion can help create huge opportunities, but they also invite scrutiny. The bigger the platform becomes, the more people pay attention, not just to what a player says, but to how they perform when the game begins. And while Reese was expanding her presence across media, sponsorships, and social platforms, something else was happening in the league at the same time. Another young star wasn't just building a brand. She was transforming the entire business of the WNBA. While the conversation around Angel Reese was centered on branding and viral debates, another rookie was quietly doing something that changed the entire business side of the WNBA. Enter Caitlin Clark. From the moment Clark stepped into the league, the impact was immediate and impossible to ignore. Her games didn't just attract fans, they turned into national events. Suddenly, regular season WNBA matchups started drawing television audiences that looked more like playoff numbers. Fans who had never watched a WNBA game before were tuning in just to see Clark play. And it wasn't just curiosity. Clark's style of basketball, deep three-pointers, fast-paced offense, and elite playmaking translated perfectly to modern audiences. Every game seemed to produce highlight clips that spread across social media within minutes. The result was something the league had rarely experienced before: appointment viewing. If Clark's team was playing, people made time to watch. The numbers reflected that shift. Several of Clark's games crossed the 1 million viewer mark across major networks, something that had historically been rare for regular season WNBA broadcasts. Her team, the Indiana Fever, saw one of the most dramatic turnarounds in attendance in league history, jumping from near the bottom of the league to the very top in just one season. Arena seats that once struggled to fill suddenly became some of the hottest tickets in women's basketball. And once television executives saw those numbers, the business side of the league started moving quickly. Major media companies began bidding for future broadcasting rights, recognizing that the WNBA was entering a new era of visibility. Clark's popularity helped demonstrate that women's basketball could generate massive engagement when the right star captured the public's attention. But Clark's influence wasn't limited to television ratings. Off the court, she quickly became one of the most marketable athletes in sports. Her endorsement portfolio expanded rapidly, including a massive deal with Nike, along with partnerships involving brands like Gatorade and Wilson. And suddenly, the entire conversation around the WNBA changed. Instead of asking whether the league could grow, people started asking just how big it could become. Because when one player can bring millions of new viewers to a sport, the ripple effects spread across the entire league. And that's exactly what started happening next. The real turning point for the WNBA didn't just happen on the court, it happened in boardrooms. Not long after the surge in viewership began, the league secured a massive new media agreement reportedly worth around $2.2 billion over multiple years. For a league that had spent much of its history fighting for television visibility, the deal was a huge milestone. And the timing wasn't random. Television networks don't invest billions of dollars based on hype alone. They look at hard numbers, ratings, ticket sales, social media engagement, and the ability to attract new audiences. Over the previous season, those numbers started moving in a direction the league had never seen before. Much of that momentum followed the rise of Caitlin Clark. During her rookie season, Clark's games consistently drew some of the highest viewership numbers in the league. Several broadcasts surpassed 1 million viewers across major networks, and many of those matchups quickly became the most-watched games of the entire season. Her team, the Indiana Fever, experienced the same surge in popularity. Attendance skyrocketed. Arenas sold out weeks in advance. In some cities, games had to be moved to larger venues just to accommodate the demand. That kind of growth doesn't just attract fans, it attracts corporate attention. Major media companies recognized the opportunity quickly. Networks such as Disney, Amazon, and NBC Universal reportedly entered bidding discussions for future broadcasting rights. The league suddenly became far more valuable because broadcasters saw a clear path to growing audiences. And when networks compete for sports rights, the price climbs fast. For the WNBA, the new deal represented more than just a financial upgrade. It was validation that the league had reached a new level of commercial potential. Increased revenue from television contracts can lead to higher player salaries, improved facilities, and expanded marketing opportunities across the entire sport. That's why many analysts describe the situation as a ripple effect. When one star attracts millions of viewers, the benefits don't stop with that player. More viewers mean more advertising revenue. More revenue means larger media deals. And those deals eventually translate into better financial opportunities for players across the league. In other words, one player's popularity can lift the entire ecosystem of a sport. And that idea, often described as the rising tide effect, has become a major part of the ongoing conversation surrounding the WNBA's rapid growth. At the center of this entire debate is a bigger question that goes far beyond one podcast clip or one viral quote. It's the difference between production and persona. In modern sports, both matter. Players today are expected to be more than just athletes. They're brands, entertainers, and personalities who interact directly with millions of fans online. Social media, sponsorship deals, and personal platforms have changed the way athletes build their careers. That's the lane Angel Reese has leaned into. She's outspoken, confident, and extremely visible off the court. Her podcast, social media following, and endorsement deal with Reebok show that she's building a presence that goes beyond basketball. In many ways, Reese understands the modern athlete playbook perfectly. Attention drives opportunity. But professional sports still operate on a very simple rule. Eventually, the numbers have to match the narrative. That's where the comparison to Caitlin Clark becomes unavoidable. Clark's rise hasn't been driven primarily by branding or media appearances. Instead, it's been fueled by something far more measurable: performance and the massive audience that performance attracts. Every major metric seems to point in the same direction. Television ratings spike when Clark plays. Ticket sales surge when her team visits another city. Jerseys sell out, social media clips explode online, and networks schedule more broadcasts around her games. The impact isn't based on perception, it's visible in the data. That doesn't mean personality or branding are meaningless. In fact, Reese's confidence and public presence are part of what made her one of the most recognizable young players in women's basketball. The league benefits when players have strong voices and personalities that attract attention. But the sports industry has always rewarded one thing above everything else: production. When a player consistently delivers results that bring viewers, revenue, and excitement to the game, the entire ecosystem reacts. Sponsors invest, networks compete for broadcast rights, teams see arenas fill up. That's why this conversation has become so fascinating to fans. It isn't just about two players. It's about two different models for building influence in professional sports, one driven by personality and brand power, the other driven by performance and measurable impact. And right now, the league is watching closely to see which model shapes the future of women's basketball. While debates continue about personalities and marketing, something very real is happening on the court with the Indiana Fever. Because the Fever are no longer just a rebuilding team hopping for better days. They're starting to look like a blueprint for what the next era of the WNBA could actually be. Yes, the spotlight naturally falls on Caitlin Clark. Her passing, deep shooting range, and court vision make her the engine that drives the entire offense. But what makes Indiana dangerous is just Clark's talent. It's the way the roster around her is developing. Take Aaliyah Boston, for example. Boston gives the Fever something every championship-level team needs: a reliable presence in the paint. She rebounds, defends, and most importantly finishes around the rim with consistency. That balance between Clark's perimeter playmaking and Boston's interior presence creates a combination that's extremely difficult for opposing defenses to handle. Then there's Kelsey Mitchell, one of the most explosive scorers in the league. Mitchell doesn't need someone else to create opportunities for her. She can generate offense on her own at any moment. That ability takes pressure off Clark and forces defenses to spread their attention across multiple threats. And the supporting pieces keep improving. Players like Lexi Hull bring defensive intensity, hustle, and the kind of energy that doesn't always show up on stat sheets, but often changes the flow of a game. These are the players who dive for loose balls, pressure opposing guards, and do the small things that winning teams rely on. The result is something that didn't exist in Indiana just a short time ago: team chemistry. Clark herself has talked about how much that chemistry matters. She's emphasized that when teammates trust each other, celebrate each other's success, and stay connected during difficult stretches, it can translate directly to results on the scoreboard. In fact, she once described that chemistry as being worth 10 to 12 points per game in terms of impact. That's not just locker room talk, that's the kind of advantage that decides close games. And that's why the Fever are becoming such an interesting case study across the league. Because while some teams are still searching for identity and stability, Indiana is quietly building something else entirely: a system where star power, depth, and chemistry all work together. And if that formula keeps developing, the rest of the WNBA may soon have a very serious problem to deal with. While momentum is building in Indiana, the situation looks very different for the Chicago Sky. The Sky entered this new era of the WNBA with plenty of attention, largely because of the arrival of Angel Reese. Reese brought one of the biggest college followings in women's basketball, along with a bold personality that instantly made her one of the most recognizable faces in the league. But attention doesn't always translate into stability. Over the past couple of seasons, Chicago has struggled to find consistent success on the court. The team has gone through roster changes, coaching adjustments, and periods where the overall direction of the franchise seemed uncertain. Instead of building steady momentum, the Sky have often looked like a team still searching for the right formula. That instability has shown up in several ways. Attendance numbers in Chicago have fluctuated, and the team hasn't been able to maintain the same level of consistent excitement that some other franchises are experiencing. When a team is rebuilding or trying to redefine its identity, that kind of uneven energy can become part of the story. At the same time, Reese's public presence continues to grow. Through social media, brand partnerships, and her podcast, she remains one of the most talked about players in the league. But as her platform expands, expectations grow with it. Fans and analysts naturally begin comparing visibility with performance, and every aspect of the team's progress, or lack of it, gets examined more closely. There have also been reports and commentary suggesting that Chicago's locker room has experienced tension during parts of the rebuilding process. Like any team going through change, differences in expectations or leadership styles can sometimes create challenges behind the scenes. It's important to note that many of these discussions come from media analysis and outside observations rather than confirmed internal statements. Still, the perception of instability can influence how a franchise is viewed around the league. And perception matters in professional sports. When fans see one team building chemistry and climbing the standings while another struggles to find rhythm, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. That's why the comparison between teams like Indiana and Chicago has become such a major talking point. One franchise appears to be building upward momentum with a clear direction. The other is still trying to figure out exactly what its future will look like. After everything that has happened, the podcast moment, the viral debates, the media attention, one question continues to dominate the conversation around the WNBA. who is actually moving the league forward. On one side, you have Angel Reese, a player who has mastered the modern athlete blueprint. She's outspoken, confident, and incredibly visible. Between her social media presence, brand partnerships, and her podcast platform, Reese has built one of the strongest personal brands among young players in the league. And there's no denying that personality matters. Sports today aren't just about what happens during the game. Fans follow players across social media, podcasts, and interviews. The athletes who can capture attention often become some of the most recognizable figures in the entire sport. Reese clearly understands that. But professional sports have always operated under one fundamental rule. Eventually, performance becomes the deciding factor. That's where the conversation inevitably shifts toward Caitlin Clark. Clark's rise hasn't been built primarily through media appearances or bold statements. Instead, it's been driven by something far more measurable: production on the court and the enormous audience that production attracts. Her games consistently generate some of the highest television ratings the league has ever seen. Arenas fill up when her team visits. Jerseys sell out, highlight clips dominate social media, and sponsors quickly line up for endorsement deals. The ripple effects extend across the entire league. Higher ratings lead to stronger media negotiations. Stronger media deals bring more revenue, and increased revenue creates better financial opportunities for players across every roster. It's a chain reaction that starts with attention and ends with real economic growth for the sport. That's why comments from legends like Leslie carried so much weight. When Leslie talked about how one player's success can lift the entire league, she wasn't speaking hypothetically. She was describing the exact dynamic playing out in real time. But the truth is, this story isn't simply about choosing one player over another. It's about understanding how influence works in professional sports. Some players generate attention through personality and brand power. Others generate it through performance and results. Occasionally, a rare athlete manages to do both at the same time. The WNBA is now entering a moment where those forces are colliding. And as the league continues to grow, fans will ultimately decide what kind of impact matters most. So the real question remains: is the future of women's basketball being shaped by persona or production?